Before the video begins, I just wanted to take a moment to thank Corosus, the original creator of Tornado Mod. Corosus was who originally got me into Minecraft modding, and his original Tornado mod, the one abandoned in 1.6.4, is one of my favorite mods of all time. In fact, I'd actually say it probably is my favorite mod of all time. And for a lot of people out there, when it was abandoned, it was really sad because as awesome as Weather 2 is, there was something about the original that was just really unique, and it's very nostalgic for a lot of us. So I wanted to go out and recreate that in my own way. So I hope that you guys will enjoy this mod, and it's worth noting that in this video I do mention a couple of times, I think, that I'm going to go over the config for this mod, but I don't do that in this video because the video just got too long. It's basically the size of a short movie, so instead I'm going to create a whole separate video dedicated to the config. But with all this in mind, and a huge thanks to Corosus, enjoy the showcase. Hello everyone, welcome to my official showcase for my Tornado Mod Classic, or Weather and Tornadoes Classic mod, whatever you want to call it. Version 1.0 is finally out, and a lot was added, and I wanted to go over it in a video, so that's what this will be. I will be going over the original content that was in the mod before this update as well, in case you're seeing this and you are brand new to this mod. So let's just jump right into it, and as you can tell, there's already quite a lot that has been added. And the first thing I'd like to go over before we get to all the new blocks and items and things that you can see all around me is the weather, which is the namesake of the mod and what most people are here for. So let's go jump right into that. So this mod adds 4 new weather events to the game, and we'll just do them in order from least interesting to most interesting, I guess. The first one is wind. Wind is a passive addition which was in the original mod, and its main attribute is that certain particles will be affected by the wind. The wind is a global phenomenon. It will vary in direction and speed, and it is the same everywhere in the world. It will not change locally. So we can see here that the wind is very, very slow because we can barely notice a little bit of wind in these smoke particles from these torches. We can also go to these leaf blocks and see that there is new leaf particles which are dropping. Leaf particles were a feature in the original mod as well that would drop from leaf blocks, and they will drop more frequently if it is more windy out. They are a good way to gauge the speed of the wind because they're so consistent. Smoke particles can be as well, but they are a little bit more ephemeral. So let's speed up the wind and see what it looks like when it is really windy. So we could use /weather classic, set, windy, and we'll do true, and then the last value is the strength, and I'll do 1, which is the maximum strength. And as we can see, things just sped up quite a bit. So now it's much more noticeable which way the wind is going because of how fast it's moving. And so wind is, like I said, mainly atmospheric. It's just a kind of ambient effect. It adds a lot to the world, I think, though. Now, this mod has actually added quite a lot of utility to the wind, but we'll get to that later because it is kind of in its own separate category. As you can also tell, if you listen closely, there's that iconic wind sound from the original mod. For those of you who aren't familiar with the original mod, this is a really nostalgic sound. It was a classic. And I added other sounds that were similar to it. So it's not just the same wind sounds, there are some new ones. But overall I tried to keep the aesthetic the same. So those are the main features of wind. The next new weather event is the Downpour. Now, if a gale is a stronger windstorm, then a downpour is a stronger rainstorm. And I'm going to waste no time and go ahead and call this in like so. And as you can tell, not only is the rain louder and denser, but the sky is also blue. And although you can't tell likely, I am quite a bit slower right now in the rain. downpours will reduce mobs' movement speed by a moderate amount. Now, you're probably wondering, why do I have this random contraption here? And, well, that's a hint right here. Like water, which can destroy these kind of blocks, downpours will create puddle blocks, which, well, as water, can erode away and destroy these blocks. So right now, this is actually a no-no. This is exposed. And so what I should do is cover this up with some blocks to prevent the downpour from destroying it. Now, of course, it's not extremely high risk. It's not going to, like, delete the whole thing, probably. But it will upset things. Because even if one of these gets replaced, it will destroy the whole contraption. Same with these torches, which are also at risk. So, it's a good idea to keep this in mind when it comes to the existence of downpours. Now, puddle blocks can be used with glass bottles to fill them up. So that's a little bit of a use for them. But other than that, puddles are an atmospheric addition. They make sounds when you walk across them and jump on them. And other than that, they are kind of just a negative. They will break through things. So, yeah, that's that. Now, if we come over here, we can see I have some props set up, and just like the redstone and the lever and the torches, these are at risk. Downpours can erode and flood out these props. And this is why I have added a new block to the game, and that is the wooden canopy, or adjustable canopy. The canopy blocks will respond to redstone signal on either side, and the signal will travel across the whole length and cause them to either detract or retract. Either unfold or fold up. And if they are unfolded, they will block the rain. If they are folded up, then they will expose the rain. They can be used as traps for mobs because they are fragile, so if I were to try to walk on these, as you can see, they will break. So they can be used as kind of traps, but they are not good bridges. The way you craft these is by 3 planks, 1 log, and then 2 strings on either side, and you'll be given 2 canopies. Now if we come over here, we can see that I got another little contraption, and this is another new block that's been added, which is the daylight detector's little friend, the rainfall detector. Just like the daylight detector, the rainfall detector will, well, provide a signal depending on the rain. No rain will produce no signal, a little rain will produce a moderate signal, and then a downpour will produce a big signal. And this is how you craft that, with 3 chains, 2 buckets, with a smooth stone in the center, and then 3 planks of any kind. Plank slabs, I should specify. And so, a downpour storm, in addition to all this, will also spawn a new mob. And I'm not seeing any right now, actually. So I'll go ahead and spawn one in. In the new Tornado Mod Classic tab, spoiler alert, we'll get the Flying Fish Spawn Egg. And we can spawn one in. And Flying Fish, I'll go more into detail with them later, but they will spawn in downpour storms, and they are basically, well, flying fish. So we'll get into them later, though. They do spawn in river biomes as well as during downpours, but you'll probably mostly find them during downpours. In addition to flying fish, another noteworthy event that would happen during downpours is that drowned entities, drowned zombies, will spawn at higher rates, and they will also be able to walk on land, because the downpour will provide them with, well, enough moisture, I guess, to be able to come up onto the surface. And drowned, not only will be drowned during downpours be able to walk on land and spawn at higher rates, they will know the location of the player within a very large radius. So they will chase the player, and there is even a new variant of drowned that has been added, which, well, I won't spoil that, but let's just say it's trouble. And that essentially concludes a downpour storm. Before we get into the last weather event, which is the biggest weather event, there's something really big that I need to talk about first. If you remember earlier, I said that there was a new utility for wind that was more than just atmospheric. And well, that's puzzle chambers. Puzzle chambers are basically a new structure which will generate in the world, and they are puzzles that you have to solve. I was inspired from the trial chambers update 1.21, and I kind of wanted to expand on that a bit. So I decided to do that, and I thought of a way to connect it to the wind. Basically, the way puzzle chambers work is that there are 3 unique blocks which will generate inside these structures: the tough turbine, the tough wind channel, and the tough ventilated cell. Now, somewhere in the structure there is a unique tough wind channel called the tough intake wind channel, and this is essentially the starting point of the puzzle. You see, the way wind channels work is they have 4 sides, each with a vent. Right-clicking each side of the block will open up that side of the vent, but only one side can be open at a time. This will allow wind to travel in through that side. So if, for instance, it's windy currently, the wind seems to be blowing this direction. Oh, nope, not that way. There we go. As you can see the wind particles going into the wind channel. This means that it is aligned with the wind. And the difference between the tough intake wind channel and the normal tough wind channel is that normal tough wind channels will not accept wind. The intake wind channel is much more lenient with what wind sources it will allow. The normal tough wind channel will simply ignore default wind. So this is why you have to start with the intake. These ones will not work if you try to align them with the wind. Now, once you find the intake wind channel, you need to adjust it with the wind. Now, don't hesitate to break the structure if you need to. After all, these are puzzles. You're supposed to think outside the box sometimes. And you need to get it to be aligned with the wind in the correct way. If we can do this, which side is it? Sometimes you don't even need to check the wind direction as long as you can mess around with the block. But it can be helpful because apparently I am getting it wrong. There we go. Now we can see that it's aligned, and the way that the wind channels work is that tough turbines, which are either above or below the channel, will receive wind from that channel if wind is currently being received. So you can see if we change it so it is no longer aligned with the wind, they will turn off. But if we align it with the wind again, they will turn on. And as you can see, the purpose of the puzzle is to direct the wind through the channels all the way, ultimately, to the ventilated cell. And I set this one up already, so I've already solved this one. So we can see that it is aligned, and the wind has stopped, you can see, but it is slowly making its way. But I don't think we're going to have enough time. Unfortunately, it seems like we do not. Oh, looks like a little bit came. So you can see how it works. The wind travels down and then ultimately through to the end. So now it's dead because the wind direction changed and this is no longer aligned. So you can see how it's a little tricky. You have to kind of babysit the intake vent to make sure you're getting the right wind. Now, the purpose of this, of course, is to get the wind to blow into the tough ventilated cell. Now, the reason that you need to do this is because the tough ventilated cell contains a reward. Let's say I were to put just this inside. Now, each structure will generate with 1 or more ventilated cells, and they will have a random loot item. Certain loot items which are new to the mod will only be found in the tough ventilated cell, in puzzle chambers. So you will need to find a puzzle chamber to explore the totality of this mod. Now, you might ask, well, why can't I just break it? And the answer is, any item which you put in a tough ventilated cell will be destroyed if you try to break it. The only way to get an item out is to blow it out through turbines. So if I were to put this in here, it is now locked in this cell. The only way I can get it out is to blow it out through turbines. And don't think about deleting these either, which you wouldn't want to do either way, because these will not break and drop themselves. Tough turbines, tough wind channels, and tough intake wind channels, and tough ventilated cells are all fragile. They cannot be gotten in survival mode. If you break them, you will only ruin the puzzle for yourself. So don't do that. You need to work with them. Now, you might run into a situation when doing puzzle chambers where a wind channel is not accessible because it is being blocked by a turbine directly. So something like this, for instance. Now, in order to access this side of the wind channel to get it to be aligned with the turbine, you will have to destroy the turbine, but obviously that's not an option. So in this situation, what you can do is use redstone to rotate the channel. So that would fix the issue like this. Additionally, this is something similar with turbines, because turbines have multiple settings. So, for instance, if I cycle through, we can see that it's off, and that was bad timing because the wind just went off. Let's see if we can get this aligned again. It seems to be coming this way. There we go. But there are 3 settings which the turbines have, and it will be necessary to adjust them in certain circumstances because they can be too short sometimes to get where they need to go. So if we can let this turn on any moment. Any moment. There we go. You can see that this is very short. It's not blowing very far, and therefore it's not able to access this channel. So in that situation, what we can do is cycle through. And then this would be even farther, and then this is off. So this is something that you will have to do in puzzle chambers. Now, getting back to the ventilated cell, aka the goal of puzzle chambers, we can see that as soon as air begins blowing into the cell from a turbine, the loot item inside will begin moving in the direction that the wind is blowing. So we can see like this. The wind is moving upwards, so the item inside will begin to blow upwards. And soon we should see it begin to pop out. Yep, just like that. And once it comes all the way out, we can retrieve it. And that is how loot is retrieved in puzzle chambers. Now that covers the basics of puzzle chambers, but there is still one more challenge, which I haven't talked about yet, that you will encounter in these chambers, and that is a new entity will spawn. Similar to how breezes will spawn in trial chambers, a new entity called the breezeling will spawn in puzzle chambers. And we can spawn one in just like so. And as you can see, they are essentially a smaller, weaker breeze without the rods or body. And they will fly around and essentially defend the chamber. And they will spawn in spawners that are hidden around these chambers. And so it will become quite a priority to take those out. Because although the breezeling is not particularly deadly, it is very annoying to deal with. And especially on certain chambers which are high up or narrow or precarious in other ways, it can be especially deadly to have breezelings flying around, and I'll show you why. So if I go into survival, like so, we can see that they will target me and then launch at me, and they are essentially hit and run enemies. You can block them with a shield, and you can dodge them if you are nimble enough. You can see that they do have a slow turn radius, so you can abuse that. And they will run into things all the time, and they are very clumsy. They can drop wind charges. They will not drop breeze rods, obviously, because they do not have rods, but they will drop wind charges. So that is a new way to get that item without having to go find breezes in trial chambers. So I'm going to go ahead and just kill this one. Just like so. And you can see they're pretty weak. But they can be very annoying to deal with. So those are breezelings. Next up, we're going to talk about the wind channeler. Now, a wind channeler can be crafted with 4 iron blocks in each corner, 4 polished deep slate in a kind of plus formation, and then a new item in the center called a weather device. Now, the weather device can only be retrieved as a reward from puzzle chambers, and it is the most important item added in this mod, because a lot of crafting recipes are dependent on it. Now, a wind channeler is kind of similar to a tough wind channel, in the sense that they fulfill a similar function in relation to turbines, but they do so differently. So whereas the tough wind channel will directly redirect wind into a turbine, the wind channeler will focus wind into glasses, into bottles, basically, which can then be used as fuel for turbines later. So if we come over here, we can see a example of a wind channeler which looks a little different, and that's because it is filled with wind. This white indicator on the sides will begin at the bottom and make its way up until the very top is also filled in. If I set the time to midnight, we can see that it glows, and this is a really cool new feature they added with 1.21.4 with the eye blossom flowers. So this is an example of a filled wind channeler, and the wind channeler, similar to the intake wind channel, will become filled by collecting wind in the same way that a intake wind channeler that we discussed earlier will simply redirect wind into other turbines. So if I were to use my commands and set it windy, we can see that if I can find the direction of the wind, which seems to be coming this way. Ah, there we go. We can see that the wind is going into the channeler, and that means that it is currently collecting wind. And over time, it will begin to fill up, as we have an example over here. Now, once it is filled up to some degree, we can collect this wind by crafting a new item called the wind vessel, which requires 3 glass blocks, an iron ingot, and this will give you a wind vessel. A wind vessel can be used on a partially or completely filled wind channeler. And you can retrieve a filled wind vessel. Now, the filled wind vessel is essentially a fuel item for the turbine, and we'll go over here and look at that. Now, the turbine can be crafted with an iron block on the top right and bottom right, a chain in the middle, 2 polished deep slate on the top, and then 2 polished deep slate on the bottom, an empty wind vessel in the back, and then a redstone in the center. This will give you a turbine. Now, a turbine can be crafted without anything from a puzzle chamber. And there's a reason for that, and that is because in addition to filled wind vessels, turbines can also use wind charges as fuel. Meaning that to power your own turbine, you technically don't need a wind channeler or filled wind vessels. You can retrieve wind charges and use those as well. But we can see over here, actually I'm going to take this out and give a better look at it. If we right click on this, it has its own little fuel storage as well as a button here for toggling the power of the turbine. So we can switch between low, medium, and far. And it works just the same way as the tough turbines, except this is one which we have total control over. Similar to the tough variants, you can cycle through these with redstone. So if I get a redstone torch, I will demonstrate that. So this can be useful for some automation. Also, you can extract filled wind vessels from a wind channeler with a dispenser if you put empty wind vessels in it. So you can automate that, as well as transport fuel into turbines with hoppers. So I tried to make it as friendly to automation, and for all you master builders out there who want to construct some kind of complicated system for transporting fuel into these and whatnot. So talking about turbines themselves, well, what can you do with the turbine? Aren't they just kind of puzzle devices? And the answer is no, they're not, because they can do a lot. They will blow items, mobs, and yourself. So this can make them really useful for transporting just about anything, really. There's a lot of uses for them, and I won't go into all of them because a lot of it is your own creativity. But this is how turbines work, and they do require an iron pickaxe to be mined. Same with the wind channeler, so do keep that in mind. But moving over here now, we have the return of the tough ventilated cell. Now, the tough ventilated cell can be crafted in survival mode with tough blocks all around. In the bottom middle, we have a polished tough block, and then we have iron bars, and this will give you a tough ventilated cell. Now, it's important to note that the tough ventilated cell is not the same as the one that you find in puzzle chambers, at least the one that you can retrieve in survival mode. The one in puzzle chambers has a kind of lock on it, and that means that it cannot be blown using your own turbines, basically. Only tough turbines can be used to retrieve items in locked ventilated cells. So this is basically a way of preventing you from cheating and just bringing your own turbine and directly getting the loot. But you can use your own turbines to blow out items put in a normal tough ventilated cell. So if we come over here, and I'll just grab this, and I'll give you another example of that working. So we can see that it will slowly begin moving in the direction of the wind. And also, if there is a block here, it will not. So it's important to keep that clear when trying to retrieve some loot item. And slowly and steadily, it will peek itself out and then be freed. Now, this can be kind of fun for maybe trolling your friends by putting something that they really need or like into a tough ventilated cell and forcing them to do your own puzzle or something to get it out. But that basically covers the ventilated cells. But there is one more thing I'd like to talk about coming all the way back over here to the intake wind channel. And that is, I mentioned earlier that the intake wind channeler, or the tough intake wind channel rather, is much more lenient with what wind sources it accepts than the normal tough wind channels. And the reason for that is you can actually use your own turbine to power the intake wind channel. And this is basically a way of bypassing the inconsistency of the wind. So if you don't want to have to babysit your own intake wind channel at the puzzle chamber you're doing, you can just put your turbine here and power it directly. So that gives maybe some more flexibility for those who are single player and don't want to have to deal with the constant inconsistency of the wind. But anyways, that covers puzzle chambers, wind channels, turbines, ventilated cells, all that. A lot was covered in that little section, but this was by far the most difficult part of the mod that I have made so far, so I hope that people enjoy this. And also, I do want to say that I am totally open to accepting custom NBT structure files for those who want to submit their own puzzle chambers and have them added to the mod. So after I review them for quality, obviously, and everything checks out, then I will add them to the game. But do note, I would like them to be in the same aesthetic as the existing puzzle chambers that are already in the game. But anyways, that's just an option for anyone out there who enjoys building and would like to take advantage of this cool system. So anyways, on to what you guys all really want, and that is the last weather event, the severe storms and the tornadoes. So the last weather event is the severe storm, and these are the storms which can spawn tornadoes. So if we go ahead and use our command, we can go to set severe storm to true, just like so. And we will notice that the sky will get very dark in a severe storm. Lightning will become more frequent, and a new, creepier wind sound will play occasionally. Now, the higher the storm stage of the severe storm, the more frequent will the lightning be, and the more likely will lightning be to strike you and other mobs. So, overall, a severe storm is just a more dangerous storm. Also, the sky will become darker, and the light level across the world will also become slightly darker as severe storm stages increase. Now, over here, we can see that I have 2 new items, and one of these is the Tornado Whirlwind, and the other is the Waterspout Whirlwind. Now, the Tornado Whirlwind can actually be crafted using 3 breeze rods, a filled wind vessel, and a diamond. Now, these are essentially the spawn items for the basic tornadoes of this mod. A Waterspout Whirlwind, which is only available in Creative, can be simply right-clicked, and a waterspout will form. Now, these were a classic part of the original Tornado mod, and I tried my best to recreate them. They are essentially weaker tornadoes which cannot destroy blocks. They will only spawn over bodies of water, and they will create puddles around them on the ground. So they can be a minor threat to things like crops. Waterspouts are very common, and they can spawn during windy rainstorms. So a thunderstorm is not needed in order for waterspouts to form. And by default, they are very common, just like they were in the original mod. Now, in addition to the waterspout, we have the Tornado Whirlwind. And this essentially acts similar to the Tornado Gun from the original mod. It will spawn in a Stage 2 tornado, Stage 2 being the basic tornado of this mod. Since the original Tornado mod didn't really have a Stage 1 tornado, it kind of jumped straight to Stage 2. And so we can go ahead and spawn this in, just like this. Right click, and here we have the classic tornado. Tornadoes will spawn depending on the storm stage, so this being a Stage 2 tornado will spawn during a Stage 2 storm, which is what we are currently in right now. Tornadoes will suck up blocks and mobs, and play loud, destructive sounds as you get closer to them. They will move across the terrain, and they will change directions. They are, by default, slightly biased towards players. This is configurable, and there's a lot in this mod that's configurable, which we'll get into later. But if we come over here, we can see that some damage is being done. The grass is being turned to dirt and coarse dirt. Now, the tornado destruction level is configurable, and there are 3 levels. By default, the destruction of the tornado is meant to be not too destructive to the world, but still noticeable. So this will still destroy wood and tree leaves and other kinds of blocks, but not the aggregate, not the ground on which everything is basically on, because that will basically completely destroy your world. And for those of you who played the original mod, you'll know that that's how it was. It basically would dig giant ravines in the ground where the tornado went. That is still in the game, but you will have to manually change that in the config. I did not want to ruin people's worlds. And this is actually a little bit of a problem, because I actually have a thing over here I haven't showed you yet that the tornado is getting rather close to, so I might go ahead and kill this using another new command, /weather classic dispel all tornadoes. And as we can see, the tornado begins to lift, and it will now recede upwards into the sky until it will dissipate completely. Now, tornadoes can be unpredictable. They can fight for a while, even after they begin dissipating. So, just because the tornado begins to lift off the ground, as you can see, doesn't mean it's over necessarily. There we go. Now, as I was saying, the destruction level of the tornado is configurable in 3 different levels. This is, by default, the middle level, so most standing structures will be destroyed, but the ground itself will not. The lower level will basically only destroy grass and crops, and everything else will be left unharmed. And then the highest level is essentially a recreation of the original tornado mod, where the entire ground will be ripped up and everything. So that is an example of a Stage 2 tornado in a Stage 2 severe storm. Now, these do spawn naturally, obviously, and that is configurable as well. but I tried my best in the default config to make it not crazy tornadoes, but consistent tornadoes. So if you're doing a tornado survival or something like that, it should be pretty good to stay on the default settings. Now, for those of you who aren't new to this mod, you will know that the original Stage 2 tornado, the water spout, and the Stage 2 severe storm have already been in this mod since release, so everything that I've shown so far is not new. But the number one most requested feature for me to add to this mod is, of course, the original storm stages from the original tornado mod. That is the Stage 3, 4, and 5 severe storms, along with, of course, the Stage 3, 4, and 5 tornadoes. And lucky for everyone out there who's been asking this has been added to the mod. So we now have 3 new severe storm stages with 3 new tornado types, increasing in intensity and destructiveness. And well, as I alluded to earlier, we can access these using our command weather classic set severe storm to true, and then coming over here and manually setting the stage using 2, 3, 4, and 5, being, of course, the original stages which were in the mod. But of course, only losers use commands to access the severe storm stages. And you know what? Only losers use commands to access any of this weather info. There's only one real way to actually access weather commands in Tornado mod. Only one way to control the weather, and that is using the weather menu from the original Tornado mod that every child who ever watched any tornado survival videos or storm chaser videos was desperate to get, and it's back. And we have, of course, a ton of new options here that are updated for this version of the mod, and I am actually not going to go over in detail how this menu works, although I will explain later how you can activate this for yourself, because one of the fun things to do, I think, and one of the things that was enjoyable for me to do when I played Tornado mod, was to learn the menu myself, and to test things out. And I know many of you are probably screaming at the screens right now, "What is the custom Tornado button?" And you'll have to play the mod to find out, because I'm not going to explain that. So you better go download the mod, because I'm not explaining that. But if we come over here, we can use the next stages and previous stages to cycle between current weather events, or at least the intensity of our current storm, and we can go to Stage 3, 4, and Stage 5. And the sky will become darker, of course, with each increasing stage, and the fog will also become darker. And using the Force Tornado button up here, we can force the respective tornado for this storm stage. So if I were to hit Force Tornado on Stage 3, it would create a Stage 3 tornado. If I were to do it on 4, it would create an F4. On 5, it would create an F5. And I'm not going to do that, unfortunately, because, well, I want you guys to explore that for yourself and get to access all of these tornadoes on your own, because in the original Tornado mod, these tornadoes were not accessible, and as you will notice, there is no weather item for higher stage tornadoes. So you're going to have to do this one on your own. Now we're going to talk about the tornado related blocks. The first one is the tornado detector. This can be crafted with 2 cobblestone, 1 gold ingot, 4 iron ingots, a compass, and a redstone dust. This works basically the exact same way as the tornado sensor does from Corosus mods. If a tornado is nearby, it will provide a redstone signal. It's really simple. This is meant to work synergistically with the siren block, which can be crafted with a note block, 4 goat horns, 2 iron ingots, and 2 redstone dust. This will get us a siren, and the siren, although it is meant to be used in conjunction with the tornado detector, it can be activated with any redstone, so you can use it however you'd like. So I'll give you an example of what this sounds like. So that's the tornado siren, and it is pretty loud, so you can hear it from a fair ways away, but it will drop off eventually. And next we have the tornado dispeller, and it's worth noting that all these blocks have been in the mod up until this point, so none of these are new. So for those of you who are familiar with the mod, all of this you'll already know about. Now the tornado dispeller can be crafted with 4 lightning rods, 4 copper ingots, and a wind charge. The tornado dispeller is used to dissipate tornadoes. And so you can do this by placing a tornado dispeller in the path of a tornado. So here we have the path of a tornado that came through earlier. We can go ahead and place this, for instance, here. And if the tornado were coming through again, it would pick up this dispeller and dissipate. The tornado dispeller would explode in the tornado and cause it to die. Now, the stronger the tornado, the more dispellers it will take. So a stage 2 tornado only requires 1 dispeller, whereas a stage 3, 4, and 5 tornado will require more than that. Another thing about the tornado dispellers is that they are sensitive to liquid. So if I were to, for instance, yeah, let's just put some water here, I guess. Okay. The tornado dispeller will react negatively with this water. So if I place this down, it will break and explode. And what this means, though, is that you can use this as a kind of trap or a utility, because the knockback from a tornado dispeller is very large, as you can see. So it can be pretty useful if you want to use it either as some sort of elevator or as some sort of trap for mobs, that you could set up a kind of elaborate system to trigger these at the right time. But that is one of the uses for the tornado dispeller. And I actually do want to show you, before we move on, what it looks like when a tornado dispeller is, well, used in a tornado. So we'll go ahead and summon a tornado in, and you can see over there, another puzzle chamber has generated. So that's a little sneak peek over there. So we'll summon our tornado, and then we'll wait for it to come down, because you do need to gauge which direction it's moving. And it's coming this way, it seems, so let's go ahead and place this down just right here. Wow, it missed it. There we go. That one got it. And as we can see, it is exploding, and there it goes. And we can see down here, this sensor is lit up. It's fighting. There we go. So that was a nice little demonstration of the tornado aspect of these blocks and why I called them tornado-related blocks. Next, we're going to talk about a new item, the weather forecaster. And you can see right here, we are at this little setup I made that was almost destroyed earlier. The weather forecaster can be crafted with 2 redstone, a clock, and a weather device. The weather forecaster is essentially a handheld weather reader. It will provide a little visual output representing the weather event that it thinks is likely to occur over the next day. So if I were to click this, I get rain. So that means that it is currently predicting rain will happen somewhere over the next day. Now, it's worth noting that the weather reader or weather forecaster is not perfect, and it can provide false positives. So you do need to take what it says with a grain of salt, but most of the time it will be correct. Now, you can do more than just use it as a little handheld device to carry around with you. You can put it into a dispenser, into a dispenser facing a siren, and if you activate this with redstone, what it will do is it will actually display a forecast to all of the players within 64 blocks what the weather reader is predicting. So you could see how it was predicting rain. Well, it's still predicting rain. And it will provide this to all players around the area. This can be pretty nice to use in conjunction with a daylight detector, so that every day you get a kind of daily forecast. So this is just a little I'd almost call it kind of quality of life item. It's not exactly anything big or flashy, and it's not invaluable in the information it provides you, considering it's quite vague. But I think it is nice to have. And just adds that little bit of atmosphere, and ha 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 ha, look at that. This is total coincidence, by the way. You can see it's thundering, so that's an example of what I mean. The weather reader correctly predicted it was going to rain, but it didn't tell me it was going to be a thunderstorm. So that's a good example of the kind of predictions that it will make. So that's the weather forecaster. Kind of cool. We're approaching the end of this mod review, and I've saved the best for last. We have one last item we need to go over, and that is the wind core. The wind core can be crafted with 6 weather devices, 2 tornado whirlwinds, and an iron block. The wind core is a very unique item, and there's nothing like it in the game. If I hover over it in my inventory, you can see that it's marked as stage 1 and grants me +1 wind manipulation. Essentially, the wind core grants you the ability to control the wind in limited ways. So, for instance, if I were to use this item, which looks very flashy, you can see that I begin drawing in wind particles around me, and if I were to go near other particles, I begin drawing them in as well. Essentially, I have become my own wind source, and I can use this for, well, lots of things. You can use it, for one, to interact with doors, and fences, and trapdoors, and other wind interactables. I can blow out candles, and even ring bells, even though I don't have a bell here with me. I can also use it to pull in other mobs. And it's worth noting that the size of the mob does matter, so if I, for instance, grab a villager, it's much less effective, and if I get a sniffer, it doesn't do anything. And this is because this is only stage 1. And given that it's stage 1, the implication is that there are other stages, and there are. You have to upgrade your wind core to become more powerful, and as it becomes more powerful, the types of mobs that you can draw in, and the ease with which you can do so, becomes greater. So for instance, if I come over to this chicken, get back here, sir. I cannot even lift him off the ground because of how weak this wind core is. But as wind cores become stronger, you'll be able to do more and more in terms of manipulating mobs around. And more than just that, as we'll get to in a second. But when it comes to upgrading your wind core, this is where the Storm Infuser comes in. The Storm Infuser is the last new block of this mod, and it can be crafted with 4 black concrete, a netherite ingot in the center, and then a filled wind vessel and a redstone dust, which can be interchanged either way. The Storm Infuser is a very sturdy block and will be immune to all tornadoes, even the strongest F5 tornadoes. And the Storm Infuser is used for upgrading wind cores. So you can see here, I can put my wind core into the Storm Infuser, and it will begin with having some particle effects. However, this isn't going to do anything on its own. If I take this out, you'll see it is still simply stage 1 +1 wind manipulation. In order to upgrade your wind core through the Storm Infuser, you require a tornado. Namely, it is by harnessing the power of a tornado into the wind core through the Storm Infuser that your wind core can upgrade to higher stages. And yes, it mimics the stage of that tornado. So for instance, if I have a stage 2 tornado here, and I am going to assume that this probably will miss. Yes. So let's go ahead and take this out. And I will go ahead and build my own pillar. And it does have to be upwards in the tornado. It isn't enough to put it simply on the ground. And I were to put this like so. You can see it has infused the stage 2 tornado into the wind core. And if I come over here and right click, and I go and look at this, I see stage 2 wind core +2 wind manipulation. And this grants me a bit stronger control over the wind. So if I were to come to the sniffer again, Still not strong enough for him, but this villager, quite a bit better. And this chicken, I can now lift off the ground, you see? So this is an example of the power, the increase in power. And in addition to simply manipulating mobs by pulling them to you, wind cores have the ability to grab blocks. And the types of blocks that wind cores can grab mimics that of the tornado. So this being a stage 2 wind core is only capable of grabbing very weak blocks, things like leaves, for instance. So as you can see here, I have myself a block, and if I wish to, I can simply drop it, or I can launch it by crouching. And given that this is only a stage 2 wind core, it will only go a little distance. But I will be able to hurt mobs with this. Or not, I suppose. There is a way, even with the stage 2, I believe. If they can move fast enough, but this one is not cooperating. There we go. So, stage 2 wind cores are so ineffective at shooting things that it's quite inconsistent to get damage done to things. Debris has to be moving quickly in order to do damage, and stage 2 wind cores just don't launch things fast enough. But it is still cool that they allow you to pick up certain things. For instance, hay would be another thing that this could pick up, sponges, and other weak blocks. It cannot pick up grass or logs, or definitely not stone. But that's where the higher stages come in. So if I come over here and I were to grab a, let's say, stage 3 wind core, this would allow me much more lenience with what I can grab. And it will launch it further. And this will definitely hurt mobs. And that's kind of sad. But it is really fun to do. And you can build stuff with it, by the way. I mean, it's a little bit difficult, but it is possible. I've learned that aiming up is ideal, like aiming a little bit above where you want to actually hit it, like that, rather than aiming directly at it. But it is inconsistent. There we go. So that's very cool. And there is a unique feature to the stage 4 and stage 5 wind cores. These are called greater wind cores, and they have a bit more going on than the other wind cores. Not only do they pick up more types of blocks and launch them further, with the stage 5 being this one, launching them maximum speed, quite far, and doing a lot of damage. But there is a new feature, if I hover my mouse over, you can see it is +1 summon vortex when in offhand. And this is very cool. So if I were to equip, for instance, the stage 4 wind core in my offhand, and then I were to aim somewhere on the ground nearby, it can't be too far away, and I were to focus wind, I can create my own tornado, which I can direct as I like, depending on where I'm aiming. Now, the stage 4 wind core tornado will not damage mobs. It will simply suck them up. Which can still be useful, though, for keeping mobs away or trolling someone. But it is not the most effective when it comes to combat. But this is where, of course, the stage 5 wind core comes in. Stage 5 wind core is much more powerful, much faster, and mobs will take damage. And you cannot hold it forever. Eventually I will go on cooldown. My wind core will stop working. And you can see that I can also suck up item entities as well. This will not work on yourself. You don't need to worry about sucking yourself up into your own tornado. It will work on players, and it will ignore pets, though. It will not do pets or certain boss mobs like Ender Dragon, Wither, and Warden. So there are some exceptions to what is affected by the tornado. In addition to this, if I were to set it to nighttime, And then let's get some... let's just grab something hostile. What spider, I guess, yeah. Not only can you damage mobs this way, but if I were to go to survival, if you hold crouch and use your tornado ability, you will repel mobs away from you, which can be very useful. Although it is temporary, you will eventually run out of wind energy. And this is where it now becomes important to talk about the durability of wind cores. Wind cores will reduce in durability over time. As you can see in my offhand, it is already a little bit damaged. And the way it works is that as it reduces in durability, it will go down to the previous wind core stage. So it won't break, it'll simply just keep declining until it reaches stage 1 again. So this means that if you want to have constant power with your wind cores, you'll constantly need high stage tornadoes in order to keep your stage 5 wind core. And so generally you'll probably be getting stage 2 tornadoes, maybe stage 3 tornadoes, and that is probably the wind core that you'll be at most of the time. But every now and then, if you manage to get a wind core infused in a larger tornado, you will have a lot of power for a while. And it is really fun. So that's the way wind cores will work. And it is also worth noting that the wind core can be enchanted with fire aspect to create your own little fire tornado, which I won't showcase here, but that is pretty fun. And I think that sums up wind cores pretty well. Well, the showcase is just about over, but there's one last thing I'll go over before I end it. Earlier I said I'd go over the flying fish in a bit more detail, so I'll do that now. The flying fish and the breezeling are the two new mobs that this mod adds to the game. The breezeling will drop wind charges, but it's pretty inconsistent, so I wouldn't farm for it through breezelings. Flying fish will drop themselves as an item, which can then be broken down into fillets, which can then be cooked. Flying fish on its own cannot be cooked. It has to be broken down. So the only real use for flying fish itself is to feed to ocelots, but that's a pretty niche use, I'd say. So I would just turn it into fillets as soon as you get them. And flying fish themselves, like I said earlier, they spawn in river biomes and in downpours. They are really derpy and goofy, and they will regularly beach themselves like idiots, like this guy is going to do. Because he just cannot be contained in such a sad little pond. He yearns for the skies. And during downpours, flying fish are hostile mobs, which a lot of you probably will be confused about, but that is because it is a Terraria reference. So those of you who have played Terraria, the flying fish in that game appear during rainstorms, and they are hostile, so that is why he is the way he is. So, other than that though, there's really not much to them. They just add a little bit more life to the world, and to downpours specifically. But that's about it. So, I don't know when the next update for this mod will come out. This has taken a long time to do this update, and I have some other things I want to do in the meantime, so it'll probably be a while before the next update comes out for this mod, but I will be fixing bugs if you can report them on CurseForge. I don't have an issue tracker or anything, so just reporting them there or direct messaging me on CurseForge works great. So I hope you guys enjoy this mod, and I'll see you. Bye-bye.